Have you ever locked eyes with someone and felt a strange kind of recognition, like your soul exhaled after a long wait? Not because of anything they said or did, but something deeper, something unspoken. It's as if your nervous system whispered, "Oh, there you are." Maybe it felt electric, maybe haunting, maybe even terrifying, but unmistakably real. It's the kind of moment that makes you question everything you thought you understood about love, fate, and your own psychology. That kind of moment isn't just poetic. It might be your unconscious speaking to you, loudly. It could be your archetypes aligning, your past surfacing, your patterns pressing into the now. Carl Jung believed these meetings were far from random, that the psyche is not only shaped by your past, but drawn toward your future. And when two souls are meant to encounter each other, when they are part of the same psychic thread, something stirs that's bigger than both. This video isn't just about soulmates in the romantic sense. It's about why certain people feel destined. We're going to explore Jungian psychology, emotional triggers, mirror neurons, karmic imprints, and even how dark psychology can hijack the language of destiny. Along the way, we'll draw from ancient philosophy and modern science to make sense of that eerie sense of recognition. You'll see how projection, and by the end of this, you won't just understand why some people feel like home. You'll be equipped with practical tools to discern between a genuine connection and a psychological trap. Because the truth is, not all magnetic bonds are healthy, and not all separation is a failure. So if you've ever wondered why certain people mark you forever, why some goodbyes feel temporary and others final, you're in the right place. Let's walk together through what Jung might call a symbolic journey, but one that's rooted in the science of the soul. Archetypal magnetism. Why we know before we think. Carl Jung once said, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." But why is it that sometimes before a word is spoken, before a thought even forms, we already feel a pull toward someone? That uncanny familiarity, that gravitational feeling in the chest or gut that bypasses logic. It's not magic. It's something far more intricate. It's the invisible architecture of the psyche, recognizing a symbol it's been shaped to respond to. According to Jung's psychological types, a work often overshadowed by his more well-known texts, each person is psychologically oriented by innate preferences, thinking or feeling, intuition or sensation. But beneath those functions lies something even more powerful: the Anima and Animus. These are the unconscious inner images of the opposite sex. Your inner feminine if you're a man, your inner masculine if you're a woman. From childhood, your psyche sketches these archetypes, partly from your early caregivers, partly from inherited psychic structures Jung called the collective unconscious. So when you walk into a room and someone instantly draws your attention for reasons you can't explain, it's likely that your Anima or Animus template has been activated. You're not just seeing them, you're seeing an unconscious idea projected onto them. That's why it feels fated. That's why it feels like you've known them before. Your unconscious recognizes the form it has been anticipating. And here's where neuroscience gives us a stunning confirmation. A 2024 fMRI study from University College London found that mirror neurons in the brain, those responsible for empathy and imitation, lit up 0.17 seconds faster when participants viewed their romantic partners than when viewing strangers. The brain, it seems, is primed to recognize certain people faster, as if it's been waiting. This phenomenon is what some might call archetypal priming. You don't just randomly fall for someone. You're psychologically prepared to notice them in a crowd. It's the unconscious filtering through thousands of faces to find the one that resonates with your unique psychic pattern. And that moment when the outer world matches the inner image, that's the spark that feels like destiny. But there's more. Evolutionary psychology suggests this template isn't just romantic fluff. It serves a purpose. It ensures that we're drawn toward those who can complete the psychological work we're here to do. People who activate something in us, something that requires attention, healing, growth. So the next time you feel inexplicably drawn to someone, don't rush to call it fate or write it off as fantasy. Ask yourself, what part of me is recognizing them? Which inner pattern is waking up? Because in that moment, your psyche might be calling you into transformation. Karmic threads and sympathia, destiny and development. Have you ever met someone and felt like your stories were already woven together, even if you couldn't name the thread? It's not just emotion, it's often shared development. Similar pain points, childhood dynamics, even unconscious coping strategies. These patterns run deeper than chemistry. They speak to what ancient philosophers called sympathia, the belief that everything in the universe is interconnected in ways the conscious mind can't always see. Marcus Aurelius put it simply, we are all woven together. And modern psychology is finally catching up to that idea. What once sounded spiritual or mystical is now being unpacked through decades of developmental research. One of the most profound examples comes from the Harvard study of adult development, which has been tracking people for over 75 years. Researchers found that couples who reported feeling a strong, almost pre-known bond often shared remarkable childhood similarities, like early parental loss, birth order patterns, or even the role they played in family systems, such as caretaker or peacemaker. These aren't just coincidences. Psychologists refer to this as developmental mirroring. It means that your unconscious may seek out partners who reflect unresolved dynamics from your early life. Not because it wants to relive the pain, but because it's trying to finish the story differently. The soul remembers, and it attempts to return to the scene of the emotional crime, hoping for a new ending. In this context, the idea of karmic ties takes on a new meaning. Karma isn't about punishment or reward, it's about repetition and recognition. You may be drawn to someone not because of their personality, but because of the emotional signature they carry. A kind of psychic familiarity that promises either a breakthrough or another loop. And that familiarity can be intoxicating because it offers the illusion of safety, until it doesn't. John Dillon's lesser-known work, Sympathy in Hellenistic Thought, explores how Greek philosophers saw emotional resonance not just as a moral quality, but as a metaphysical reality. Sympathia was the force that explained everything from planetary movement to human attraction. It meant that we don't just choose each other by logic or lust. We're called magnetically by invisible similarities in history, energy, and emotional blueprint. Understanding this can radically change how you interpret destined love. It's not about fairy tales. It's about recognizing who enters your life to reflect where you've been and where you're ready to go. Sometimes that's the person who walks with you into healing, and sometimes it's the one who shows you the work you still need to do. Either way, they're not random. They're messengers from your past, arriving to shape your future. Projection. Mechanics. The mirror you're really kissing. You ever fall for someone and think, they just get me? And then months later, you realize they didn't really know you at all, but they sure triggered something. That feeling might not have come from what they gave you, but from what they reflected. According to Jungian theory, especially in the work of Robert A. Johnson, most people don't fall in love with another person as they truly are. They fall in love with a projection, a mirror image of their own unlived desires, suppressed traits, and unfinished emotional business. Johnson said, "We don't so much fall in love as awaken to a projection. What you admire, or even resent in someone else is often a fragment of your own psyche, disowned or denied. You unconsciously outsource it to someone else, and then experience it through them. That's why the attraction feels so powerful. It's not just about them. It's about what they awaken in you. This is where it gets fascinating." In a 1999 psychological study by Baldwin and Holmes, researchers found that when participants were subliminally primed with images of parental figures, they rated random strangers as significantly more likable and trustworthy. Just the unconscious reminder of a familiar caregiver altered their perception of someone entirely new. Your brain literally transfers old feelings onto new people without you realizing it. This is projection in action, and it's not always romantic. We project authority, wisdom, danger, even salvation. But in romantic connections, projections carry a particular weight. You might not be kissing them. You're kissing an idea, an image formed long before they showed up. And the danger? If they disappoint that image, if they don't fulfill the role your psyche wrote for them, you may feel betrayed, not by what they did, but by what they failed to be. Anne-Marie Rizzuto, in her underappreciated psychoanalytic study The Mirror Within, explored how these inner images, especially formed in early childhood, quietly sculpt our adult relationships. And if these projections go unchecked, they can lock us into cycles of heartbreak, chasing people not for who they are, but for the mirror they hold. But here's the hopeful part. Once you start noticing your projections, what you praise, what you blame, what you crave, you can begin to take them back. You reclaim pieces of yourself that were living outside of you, attached to someone else. This is the real magic of projection work. The more you recognize the mirror, the more you become whole. You stop needing someone else to carry your gold or your shadow. You begin to love others not for the fantasy, but for their reality. And that's where authentic connection starts. Shadow activation, when love turns the lights on. There's a moment in every real relationship, if it's truly real, where the glow of infatuation fades and something more uncomfortable takes its place. That moment where you stop seeing perfection and start seeing patterns. You get triggered, irritated, sometimes even scared. And most people think something's gone wrong. But what if that's the exact moment everything is starting to go right? Jung believed that love doesn't just unite people, it illuminates. It brings light to the places we've kept hidden, sometimes even from ourselves. Those unconscious corners, the fears we've masked, the pain we've never spoken of, that's the shadow. And the person who triggers you might not be doing anything wrong. They might just be holding up a mirror to everything you've refused to look at. Lao Tzu once said, "Knowing others is intelligence. Knowing yourself is true wisdom." In love, both get tested. Because while it's easy to understand someone else's flaws, it's much harder to sit with your own when they show up wearing your partner's face. In couples therapy, this is called shadow activation. One striking case involved Sarah and Miguel, whose story is documented in trauma psychology supervision notes. They were madly in love, until they weren't. One argument would trigger Miguel's abandonment wound, which would then ignite Sarah's control complex. It seemed chaotic, but therapists noticed a fascinating physiological trend. During these emotionally intense moments, Sarah's cortisol, her stress hormone, spiked by 18%. But after a few months of conscious integration work, her levels not only returned to normal, they dropped below her original baseline. Meaning, healing had occurred. Not through avoidance, but confrontation. Not in spite of the triggers, but because of them. Robert A. Johnson's Owning Your Own Shadow makes a bold point. Most people avoid real love because it brings them too close to their own darkness. And yet, that's precisely why we're drawn to it. The psyche longs for wholeness, not just harmony. And wholeness only comes when light meets dark. When what we admire and what we fear can coexist in one room without us running from it. When someone gets under your skin, instead of pushing them away, ask, what part of me are they waking up? Are they challenging my boundaries or pointing out where I've never had any? Are they making me feel small or reminding me of a voice I buried long ago? These aren't easy questions, but they're the right ones. Because sometimes, the person who seems to cause the most emotional chaos is also handing you the flashlight to your own inner basement. And once you've seen what's down there, you're no longer a hostage to it. That's the gift of real love. Not safety, but transformation. Not ease, but integration. It's not always pretty, but it's how the soul grows up. Neurobiology of destiny. Oxytocin, dopamine, and the default mode network. There's a reason some connections feel so intense, so undeniable, that it's as if your entire body is conspiring with your heart. And in many ways it is. Love, or at least the sensation of it, isn't just a poetic metaphor. It's chemical, electrical, neurological, and incredibly powerful. So powerful, in fact, that it can override logic, silence your fears, and alter your perception of reality. Antonio Damasio, a giant in the world of neuroscience, famously said, "We are feeling machines that think," not the other way around. Our decisions, especially in love, are rooted not in cold reasoning, but in the way our emotions shape and color our thoughts. And when it comes to love or attraction, few forces are more persuasive than brain chemistry. Let's talk about oxytocin, the so-called bonding hormone. It's released in moments of physical intimacy, eye contact, even during simple acts of trust. When two people touch, embrace, or even share vulnerable emotions, oxytocin starts stitching an invisible thread between them. A 2023 study by the Pekua Institute at MIT demonstrated just how crucial this chemical is. When oxytocin receptors were blocked in prairie voles, one of the few monogamous species in the animal kingdom, their established partner preferences disappeared in less than 24 hours. Think about that. Erasing one molecule erased the sense of loyalty and connection. And then there's dopamine, the pleasure and reward molecule. When you're around someone who excites you, who validates you, or mirrors your ideal self, your dopamine spikes. It's addictive. It wires your brain to seek them out again and again. It can even create cravings when they're gone. This is part of why the early stages of love feel euphoric, and why heartbreak feels like withdrawal. But the story doesn't end there. The brain's default mode network, associated with self-reflection and identity, also plays a massive role. When we fall in love, studies have shown that this network actually shifts. Your sense of self temporarily blends with the other person. It's why their pain feels like your pain, why their joy becomes your joy. You're not just sharing life experiences, you're rewiring your internal map of the world to include them. All of this brings us to a strange truth. What we call destiny might in part be the neurobiology of resonance. When your psychological archetypes align with someone's presence and your brain's chemical systems start dancing in harmony, it creates an overwhelming sense of rightness, as if something ancient has just clicked into place. Carl Jung believed that archetypes guide our path, but science shows us that chemistry fuels the journey. The body isn't separate from the soul. It's the stage on which the myth plays out. So when you feel pulled towards someone as if you've known them forever, maybe you have, at least in the circuitry of your mind, the dreams of your unconscious, and the silent scripts written by your earliest emotional memories. Love, then, is not just emotional, it's spiritual, it's biochemical. And when those layers align, the experience can feel inevitable. Dark psychology, pitfalls. When destiny is used against you. Have you ever met someone who seemed to know exactly what to say, exactly how to look at you, how to touch the places inside you that even you hadn't named yet? It's exhilarating at first, but sometimes that rush isn't chemistry, it's choreography. Sometimes that powerful pull we call destiny is actually design and not yours. This is where dark psychology creeps in. Not everyone who talks about soulmates or twin flames is operating from love. Some are operating from strategy, because when people believe a connection is fated, they stop questioning it. They ignore red flags. They silence their intuition. And that's exactly the vulnerability that manipulators exploit. Robert Cialdini, one of the most influential minds in behavioral psychology, once said, "People prefer to say yes to those they like, but it goes deeper. People are more easily persuaded by those they believe are meant for them." The illusion of a spiritual connection lowers defenses, bypasses skepticism, and accelerates emotional intimacy. That's why rhetoric like twin flame or karmic partner is so commonly used by those with dark triad traits: narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy. A 2021 study out of Queensland showed that individuals who scored high on these dark traits were twice as likely to use soulmate narratives in romantic contexts, not to express genuine love, but to gain control. It's what behavioral economists call commitment escalation. You're made to feel that leaving would not just be painful, but cosmically wrong. Gavin de Becker's under-recognized classic, The Gift of Fear, warns us about this exact danger. He explains that intuition is often the first defense against manipulation, but it's routinely ignored when someone seems perfect. When they mirror your values, speak your language, and reflect your deepest yearnings back to you. It doesn't always mean alignment. Sometimes it means surveillance. They've studied what makes you tick, and they're using it to bind you. So how do you protect yourself? You learn to recognize persuasion cues, excessive flattery, future faking, emotional intensity too early. You watch for inconsistencies between words and actions. You tune into micro-expressions, the fleeting signs of contempt, dismissal, or manipulation. But more than anything, you stay connected to yourself. You don't outsource your sense of reality to someone else's story. Because even if two souls are meant to meet, you still get to choose how, when, and if that meeting grows into something real. Destiny, when it's genuine, doesn't need to convince you. It doesn't rush. It doesn't over-explain. It simply unfolds, and it always makes room for your boundaries, not just your surrender. Synchronicity and the science of coincidence. There are moments that stop you in your tracks. You think of someone and they call. You open a book and the line speaks to something you were just struggling with. You bump into a stranger who turns out to be exactly the kind of person you needed to meet. At some point you have to wonder, is this just coincidence or is something else at play? Carl Jung gave this phenomenon a name: synchronicity. It's not about cause and effect. It's about meaning. He called it an ever-present reality for those who have eyes to see. It's when two or more events align in a way that's meaningful to you, even though there's no logical reason for them to be connected. And when it happens between two people, the effect is especially powerful. It can feel like the universe is conspiring to bring you together. But what's really happening inside your brain when life starts to feel this connected? The Geneva Consciousness Lab conducted a fascinating study in 2020. Participants who reported experiencing a meaningful coincidence showed increased activity in their brain's salience network, the same network that lights up when we encounter something emotionally significant. What this means is that the brain quite literally assigns a glow to events that feel meaningful. It's not just in your head, it's in your neurochemistry. Joseph Cambry's underappreciated work, Synchronicity, Nature and Psyche in an Interconnected Universe, expands on Jung's idea by weaving in physics, systems theory, and consciousness studies. He argues that synchronicity could be evidence that we're embedded in a living, responsive web of meaning. In this view, coincidences aren't random. They're signals, invitations to pay attention, not because the universe is handing you a roadmap, but because it's reflecting your inner reality in the outer world. And when this happens in love, it's often the trigger that makes us feel like this person was meant to be. You both watched the same obscure film. You both dreamed of the same city. You meet again in an unexpected place. These aren't just quirks. They're psychologically significant because the human brain seeks patterns. It looks for meaning. And when those patterns emerge at the exact moment you're emotionally open, they stick. So what can you do with this? Start logging your synchronicities. Literally. Keep a notebook or use your phone. Track when things align. Over time, patterns emerge. Emotional states, repeated names, themes that show up in unexpected ways. And that practice sharpens your intuition. It helps you distinguish between mere novelty and real symbolic resonance. Synchronicity doesn't prove destiny, but it does suggest something bigger than logic might be guiding your attention. And maybe, just maybe, that guidance is helping you wake up to the deeper story unfolding in your life. One that involves not just who you meet, but why. Sacred separation, individuation in the gap. It's easy to believe that if two people are truly meant to be, they should never fall apart. But that belief ignores something essential. Real growth often demands space. Not space as avoidance, not space as neglect, but as necessity. There are connections so potent, so psychologically charged, that they awaken not just love, but transformation. And sometimes, that transformation has to happen apart. Simone de Beauvoir once said, "To will oneself free is also to will others free." In love, this means recognizing that freedom and connection aren't opposites. They're intertwined. And real love, the kind that touches your soul and not just your senses, often calls you to find yourself first, before you can fully meet the other. In Jungian psychology, this process is called individuation. It's the unfolding of the true self, unique, conscious, and whole. And here's the paradox. Sometimes the only way to individuate is through separation. When the relationship begins to mirror back your insecurities, your projections, your childhood wounds, it's not always a sign to push through. Sometimes it's a signal to pause and realign within yourself. Margaret Mahler's lesser-known but groundbreaking book, The Psychological Birth of the Human Infant, explains how even infants must go through a process of separation from the mother in order to develop a stable sense of self. Applied to adult love, the same principle holds. You cannot merge completely with another and still expect to know who you are. The Toronto Breakup Growth Study in 2019 followed individuals who had experienced emotionally intense relationships followed by separation. Astonishingly, 41% reported a clearer, more consolidated sense of identity within 18 months of the breakup. They didn't just heal, they evolved. Because separation, when embraced consciously, doesn't close the story. It turns the page. This is what ancient alchemists called the Nigredo phase, the dark night of the soul, the dissolving of what once was, to make room for something more authentic to emerge. It hurts, it confuses, but it also purifies, and it prepares. So if you've ever had to walk away from someone you felt spiritually bound to, it doesn't mean you were wrong about the bond. It might mean the bond was meant to teach you something only the space could reveal. Sacred separation isn't failure. It's the soul's way of clearing the ground, of making sure that if and when the reunion comes, it will be between two whole people, not two half-built dreams clinging to each other for completion. Alchemical reunion, rising after the Nigredo. Sometimes reunion isn't just about coming back together. It's about arriving as someone new, someone clearer, someone whole. Love that's gone through fire doesn't return the same. It returns refined. And that refinement, that transformation, is what makes some reunions feel less like a restart and more like a resurrection. Marie-Louise von Franz, a close collaborator of Jung, once said, "Individuation aims at wholeness, not perfection." That line cuts deep when you've loved and lost, and find yourself loving again, perhaps even the same person. Because true reunion doesn't happen because two people miss each other. It happens when both have returned from their separate journeys with something to offer beyond longing. In alchemy, after the Nigredo, the blackening phase of dissolution, comes the albedo and then the rubedo, the whitening and reddening. These weren't just chemical processes. They were metaphors for psychological integration. First, the ego is stripped, then clarity emerges. Then, the union of opposites creates something entirely new. This is the symbolic journey of the soul through love, falling apart, waking up, and meeting again, this time from consciousness, not projection. A 2022 longitudinal study from the UCLA Couples Lab followed 38 couples who reunited after at least 5 years apart. Of those, 72% reported shifting from anxious to secure attachment styles after reunion. The time apart wasn't a pause, it was an evolution. Their dynamics didn't go back to what they were. They created a new pattern, one built on awareness, emotional regulation, and mutual respect. Alchemy isn't about turning lead into literal gold. It's about turning raw emotion, wounds, and chaos into something meaningful, something strong. And that's what real reunion requires. Not returning out of loneliness or nostalgia, but showing up as metals forged by time and inner work. This phase in love asks the hardest question of all. Not, do I still love them? But, have I become someone who can love better? Because two people can be magnetically drawn to each other again and again. But unless what they're bringing to the relationship has matured, they'll repeat the same pattern. Just with more history behind it. The miracle of reunion is that it proves love can survive ego death. It shows that even the most painful separation can be a portal, not an ending, but a rite of passage. And when two souls return not as halves trying to complete each other, but as individuals rooted in their own center, the connection that forms is no longer built on need. It's built on choice. And that's when love becomes not a destiny imposed by fate, but a conscious act of sacred creation. Living the myth consciously, from story to embodiment. We all carry stories about love, what it should look like, feel like, how it should begin, and most dangerously, how it should end. These myths live in our unconscious like old maps. But the truth is, no one else's map can walk your path for you. If you're going to find something real, something soulful, you'll have to stop just believing the story and start living it. Not blindly, but consciously. The Philokalia, a sacred collection of writings from early Eastern Christian mystics, offers a striking invitation. Keep your mind in hell and despair not. Strange words for a conversation about love, but powerful ones. Because living your myth consciously means staying awake even when things fall apart, especially when they fall apart. It means not turning away from the mess, the uncertainty, the parts of yourself that still don't have answers. Carl Jung knew this intimately. In the Red Book, his most private and visionary journal, he wrote not for the world, but for his soul. In it, he confronted figures from his own unconscious, symbolic representations of fear, love, power, and loss. And what he discovered was that healing doesn't come from bypassing your myth. It comes from entering it fully, seeing it, questioning it, rewriting it from the inside out. Modern psychology supports this. Mindfulness-based relationship training, MBRT 22, a growing area of practice, has shown that couples who integrate mindfulness into their dynamic reduce reactive cortisol spikes by over 30% in just 8 weeks. That's not magic. That's what happens when people stop trying to live a fairy tale and start being present in the relationship they actually have. Presence means seeing your partner clearly, not as your savior, your missing piece, or your forever, but as a living, breathing, evolving being with their own myth, their own shadow, their own light. And it means showing up with your own myth fully owned, not needing them to validate it, carry it, or rescue you from it. This is what conscious love looks like. It's not about avoiding the hard conversations. It's not about controlling outcomes or proving you were right all along. It's about standing in the fire of your shared humanity without losing yourself. It's about listening without defending, touching without fixing, and holding space for the parts of each other that are still unfolding. So ask yourself, am I still trying to make someone fit my story? Or am I allowing the story to grow because of who they are? Living your myth doesn't mean forcing life to play out the way you dreamed. It means waking up to the story already inside you and choosing, moment by moment, to live it with awareness, with compassion, and with the courage to rewrite it if love asks you to. Because that's what real transformation demands. Not perfection, but presence. Not prophecy, but participation. Connecting the dots. So now that we've traveled through archetypes, brain chemistry, karmic resonance, separation, reunion, and the unconscious myths we live through love, what do we do with it all? How do we make sure this isn't just another beautiful idea we forget by morning? The answer isn't complicated, but it is personal. You begin by meeting the most important soul in your life, your own. Before you can truly meet someone else, you need to understand who's standing at the door when they knock. Start here. Take a moment tonight and journal 3 traits you admire deeply in someone you're drawn to. Then write down 3 traits that irritate or trigger you in that same person or someone else entirely. Now ask yourself, where do these qualities live in me? Because what you admire and what you reject are often fragments of your own psyche seeking a voice. This is projection in real time. Owning it is shadow work in its simplest form. Next, practice breath awareness during emotional reactions. When you're triggered, place your attention into your body. Slow, intentional breathing, especially with a focus on scanning the body, can reduce amygdala reactivity in under 90 seconds. That's neuroscience. But it also reconnects you with yourself, which is the real key to presence in any relationship. And try this. Write a letter, not to your partner, or your ex, or your fantasy soulmate, but to the part of you you're tempted to outsource, the one you project onto others. Let that part speak. What does it long for? What does it fear? This dialogue can uncover emotional truths you've been unconsciously seeking in someone else. And remember, boundaries don't mean distance, they mean clarity. Speak your needs in I language. I feel overwhelmed when, or I need more time to process. That's how you prevent emotional coercion, even in the most intense connections. Because soulful doesn't mean boundaryless. It means sacred. And sacred love always honors both the connection and the individual. If all of this still feels like too much to hold alone, that's okay. Therapy, coaching, or even peer support spaces can help translate insights into actual change. That's how transformation becomes integration. Because awareness without action doesn't heal. It just intellectualizes. So yes, if two souls are meant to meet, they will. But the version of you who shows up in that meeting, that part's on you. You don't get to control timing, or their path, or the outcome. But you do get to choose how you meet yourself along the way. And maybe that's the most beautiful thing of all. Like, share, and subscribe if you're ready not just to find your soulmate, but to meet the parts of yourself you've been waiting to love all along.